What's going on, everybody? John Ramdean and Robin Black. We are here in downtown Toronto at Play Dead. Always activity going on in the heart of the big smoke. But the thing that is on our mind, UFC 214, the main event, it doesn't get better than this. Technically, spiritually, emotionally, historically, when you look at this matchup between the current champion, Daniel Cormier, and arguably the greatest fighter in the history of fighting in Jon Jones, my gut instinct is to just assume that Jon Jones will become the light heavyweight champion once again. However, when you look at the fact that the competition that Cormier has had with Alexander Gustafsson, very similar to Jon Jones, and we remember how close the fight with Gustafsson was. The fights with Anthony Rumble Johnson, the fight with Anderson Silva. Cormier has been in the spotlight, he's been active, and one of the things they talked about in the camp is they went back and looked at that first fight with Jon Jones, and they looked at all the areas that they weren't successful, and the idea is to win those positions this time.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The challenges that were there are still there. You know, the physical challenges, the length, the innovation, the unpredictability, the sort of physical, the ridiculous physical confidence of Jon Jones, all that's still there. And you can't change him, so you can change yourself. And that's what they're trying to do. And it's interesting. And one thing I was thinking about today, I was preparing some things for TSN this weekend. And when you talk on TSN, is who is airing the undercard as well as I'm going to cut in during the main card, we may only talk for 2 minutes.
Right.
Right? Where here we can peel and explore and whatever. In those 2 minutes, you have to look at how can
concise.
you get, yeah, how do you get to that point? And one thing that came up was rematches. And you know, as small of an advantage as it might be, Daniel Cormier has prepared for a rematch before with Anthony Johnson. He's gone back and he's looked to improve. He's looked to figure out, build on what he knows. So that small thing, and yes, he won both the Johnson fights. He won the first one, which allowed him to prepare a certain way, but he has prepared for the same fighter before. And although that's only a small thing, it's a real thing. And as he goes in now and he examines the places he lost, he examines the strategies that were flawed, he can do it having been successful in a rematch before.
And I've referenced this before. I had a chance a number of years ago to go down to AKA. And one thing that Cormier was talking about is as long as you have your sights set on the #1 fighter in the division, at the time it was Jon Jones. He said you have everything else covered. On top of that, these guys have faced each other, and they were set to face each other again before that fight fell apart. So Jon Jones has constantly been on the mind of Daniel Cormier for the past half-decade.
That's it. It's when you talk to him, that was probably 2013.
Yeah.
Right?
Something like that.
Yeah. And you say you've referenced it before. It has different meaning every time you think back to that conversation you had with him. The first time it was, hey, I've had this guy, I've been looking at him as the way, if I can beat him, I'll beat everyone on the way up to him. And that was his thinking.
Yeah.
But it meant something when he was on his mind for 2 years. Then, when it was somebody that he'd already fought and was preparing, it means something very different. And it means something different each time. And at this point, to be honest, he's sick of it.
Yeah, it feels like he's sick of it.
He is.
He doesn't want to talk about Jon Jones. He doesn't want to think about Jon Jones. It almost like he can't help but be mad. That you bring up his name, it's like, oh, this guy just makes me sick. But he's going to be tied to Jon Jones forever, because I think when you look at arguably the best fighter, certainly in that division, is going to be Jon Jones. Who is the number 205-pound fighter ever in history? It has to be Daniel Cormier, right?
For sure.
Is it Chuck? Is it Randy? Is it Tito? Is it Vitor? I think based on accolades, it's got to be Cormier.
Yeah, and the challenges that are Jon Jones are still there, and they'll always be there. His length, the way he understands his length in relation to you and where you're standing, how he moves, the fact that he switches. I've just done something here. The fact that he switches back and forth and is unpredictable, plays with range in different ways, draws you in different ways. When you move towards him, that one issue from outside, it's very difficult. Cormier can't reach him, so Cormier has to push in. When you push in, he pushes in a little further, and then he slices you up with elbows. And you saw it against Teixeira. He had no intention to fight Teixeira in there. Mm-hmm. He just discovered himself in there as he moved towards Teixeira. Teixeira moved towards him.
I can do this.
Exactly. He suddenly realized I can dominate in here. And he started to beat Cormier up in there as well, an area that Cormier would have felt strong in. So all of that is still there. Only you're sick of it now. You're sick of him, you know. Both have said, we're never going to be okay in the same room together unless there's people around. That's real.
So
that's real.
Does Cormier believe that this is his last shot at Jon Jones in the sense, because one of the things, I know you don't like you're not a fan of the term training camp.
Yeah.
Because fighters are always training they're always in training camp.
Yeah.
You're always trying to get better as a martial artist, especially as the playing field continues to rise. You have to make sure that you're good. One of the things that Cormier has done is he's brought in some outside help. I think one wrestler from Duke who apparently wrestles like Jon Jones and is huge like Jon Jones. And he brought in this kickboxer named Frank Munoz, who I had a chance to call his fights in K1. And he's big, and he's rangy, and he's long. Does that matter?
If only you could put those two guys together. You know? I've spent a lot of time in the last month and a half with George St. Pierre. And George still trains. You see him at the Montreal Wrestling Club training with the best wrestlers in Canada. And he's brought in karate world champions from Europe.
And Thai boxers from Thailand.
He's brought in Thai boxers from Thailand. He still does this to this day. He does it because, and the term well-rounded, when it started to take shape as a definitive explanation of what a fighter was, it was George they were talking about. So he's always been the guy able to weave it all together. And while being that guy, he still pushed to fight each and spar with each in their area of expertise. So he does it for the purpose of being the worst guy in an exchange and what that does for you mentally. So if Cormier is doing it for that reason, actually lose some wrestling rounds to somebody when you're Cormier.
Because this guy was young. Have you seen him?
Yes.
He's young and he's big and he's strong. And I'm sure Cormier hasn't been manhandled like that in quite a long time.
For sure. And so Jones, Cormier knows that there was a psychological element to that loss. Jones has the ability to big brother you a little bit, you know.
Oh, he said, I put my hand on your head.
Exactly, and that is part of it. You don't know which aspects of that, if any, made Cormier take round 4 off. So he goes walking into round 4, and he thinks to himself, you know, I just gotta be safe in this round, expend less energy, and bring it all in round 5. That was his mistake. He lost the fight with that choice. If he goes in and gets beaten in situations by a young, destructive wrestler and then keeps coming back in training, and no matter how many times he loses an exchange or a skirmish, he comes back stronger and stronger and stronger, that'll prepare him for that reality if round 4 happens. Right. And same with a kickboxer. If you are getting beat by somebody at their specialty, how that can strengthen you and make you anti-fragile is very powerful. So that could be part of the motivation. In the end, man, that idea that we got to get this thing over with. Let's get this thing done and let's be done with it. That's not always a good thing either. Personally, I'll be shocked if Cormier ever fights again. I will be shocked because to me, and if
win or lose.
If he's thinking this way too, he's like, there are 29 minutes left in my fighting career. 5 5-minute rounds and the 4 single minutes between them. And that's it. That's all there is. I'll die out there. That's not a bad way to approach it. Because the truth is, if he wins, he's avenged his only loss against his arch enemy that he'll be tied to for life. And people would say, oh, you know, you're 1-1. You don't have to do nothing.
He doesn't have to.
You don't have to do nothing.
When you see those dollar signs, when the UFC's trying to figure, we need a big money fight. Yeah. Okay, well, this is it. TC, what do you say? All right, fine.
I'd still be shocked. To me, and sure, when something says $2 million, I've never been in the situation to think about how that would. You have children. You know what I mean? Like how that would change your life. But if you're writing the storybook and you win, you've avenged the only loss in your entire career against the man that you hate with the championship belt. Nobody can no longer argue it. I'm peacing out. And if I lose, The truth is, I'm the second best fighter of my generation. If he hadn't existed, maybe I'd be considered one of the best of all time. Unfortunately, he did exist. I hate his ass, and he beat me. Good night.
It's Megadeth and Metallica. Is what it is.
Exactly. And so, what does he do? But you're right. You could walk off and say you got a phone call. Hey, Dana. Yeah, retirement's good. How many million?
Yeah. Because I agree with you 100% from a sporting standpoint and perspective. I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. Everybody said this other belt wasn't real. Well, I got the real belt, and I beat the fucking greatest fighter of all time. It's never going to be this good inside of the cage.
Exactly.
I'm out.
Exactly.
But unfortunately, there's too many other factors involved. People are like, are you crazy? You're leaving so much money on the table. We can make big fights. We can get you the Brock fight. We can get you the Conor fight. It's like, all right, sure. Let's give this
Connor's
a go.
Gonna fight at 200.
I'm just saying.
And don't rule it out. Trust me. It sounds stupid, but it is. Conor is crazy.
That's pride. Let's have big guys versus little guys.
Sure. Conor would take that fight.
So when you think of a strategy for Daniel Cormier to come out and beat Jon Jones, what do you think? What do you expect would happen for him to get his arm raised and that title?
Fighting has become simpler as it has progressed. We the audience, they understand what's going on. They understand it more than even a year ago, the way it was being presented in analysis and breakdowns. The idea that when they fought the first time, Cormier's got to get to him and take him down. That was how it was. We all believed that to be so. If Jones could defend the takedown, it was over. That's no longer true. Cormier will have been really, really focusing on getting his hands on his chin, and he was able to get to Jones. And when you go in to get into that zone in which you're grappling and competing in a wrestling arena, as you slip back out, there's shots there. So it used to be, for a man like Cormier, I had to get past his long-range weapons to get into range to land my punches. Now I will push my way in as tight as possible, and as we back out, I pass through that range again. So it's the push and the pull of that game is there for him. But there's an interesting thing. I told you when I went out to, many years ago, I was with me and Forrest Griffin went on a train with the Score Fighting Series.
Yeah, I remember
out
that.
to Montreal. It was really fun.
It was chaotic.
It was chaotic. My friend Cam took mushrooms on the train when he was working, and that was weird. We love you, awesome. Cam.
Awesome.
Cam Stewart. Yeah. He's an odd and brilliant character. But also on that train were all of these professional poker players. And when you watch them speak to each other and sometimes have little gambling things, they were always trying to undermine what the other believed about them. And I noticed Cormier doing that a little bit. There's been a couple times where he said, the difference this time is I'm going to be pushing to Jones's chin so bad, I'm going to be throwing and firing and throwing punches so bad, he better push into that wrestling and try to take me down. Well, that worked perfectly against AJ. AJ should have stayed outside punching, and instead the pressure made AJ go in. The second AJ went in, and I was backstage. I was from literally me to you away from Daniel when he was warming up to fight AJ in that fight. And I could feel his stress, and Rockhold said it too. He said, I've never seen him this stressed. And
stressed in a good way or a bad?
Rockhold didn't like it. And he said he noticed the difference. As soon as AJ grabbed him, he looked at Cormier and he realized Cormier thought, okay, I'm winning this fight. I'm winning this fight. And he's trying to push Jones into that too. He's talking, he's undermining him like those poker players on the train, trying to make Jones second guess it and go in and wrestle him because that's what he's ready to do.
Well, it seems like he is getting under Jones's skin. There was the one face-off that they did, not really face-off. They were each in separate rooms, and they're both responding to whatever media call it was. And afterwards, Jon Jones was getting worked up. He said, this is a fucking terrible way to start my day, having to listen to Cormier. So will Cormier be able to ruffle his feathers using mental attacks in addition to surprising him with something? Because, again, most people that I've spoken to believe that with Daniel Cormier being 40, he couldn't beat him the first time. Jon Jones has had a year to rehab any injuries, get his head together, and maybe be an even better fucking version of Jon Jones.
Yeah. Hey, How long ago did we go down and I did brunch with Jorge? That was brunch with Jorge in Dallas, maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago, maybe 8 weeks ago. And Jorge's manager's name is Abe Kawa. Abe is an awesome, awesome guy, and he and Jorge have been so good to us, and we love hanging out with him, and they always give us a little inside information. And I'm standing there with Jorge, Abe, Mark and I said, Jorge, Abe, and Malky. Jones is there. I said, hey, Jones, you think I could interview you? I don't know, ask him. I said, Malky, could I? Probably not, bro, he says. Like, there's an aura to them, and they're not trying to be dicks. Jones is just kind of like that. And so Jones kind of...
I didn't know that. You didn't tell me this.
I know. So Jones wanders off, and then Malky and Abe and Jorge, and I think there was 1 or 2 other people around. And you know when you see interviews and people say things, they're like, well, you know, we believe we can whatever. This was just a bunch of guys hanging out. And you and I have experience that these people talk to us different because they recognize that we're fight lovers. We're not trying to trick anyone into saying anything. And they literally looked at me and goes, bro, can you believe this guy thinks he's going to beat Jon? And everybody in their orbit just thinks that's ridiculous. Jones is insulated by this group of people, coaches, fighters, his manager's crew, the other guys, and they're all looking at it going, you can see Dan's broke. You can see, and Jones is, when you're, and you've spoken to Jon, when you're in his presence, there's no fucking around. Like, this is something else. Yeah. This is a different...
Shoulders back, and he's tall, and he's...
powerful, and he has been put on earth to dominate and destroy other men, and they all feel it. And Cormier needs to overcome that. He needs to not carry that with him, and he's been buried under it for years now. And he needs to go out there free of that stuff, to go in and do what he needs to do. Get past the long range, get into the middle, and into the range where his knuckles can get on there. When he throws that overhand right and he puts a left hook behind it, when you're backing up and he steps with his right leg against that left hook, he hurts people. Yes. If he lands or uses that, try to get into the body. If he can't get him down, fade out and land again. He needs to do that. If he does that and he has his best night and you see a round 4 and he goes in psychologically excited to get round 4 again, Cormier can win and retire the champ or come back and make those millions.
I like
Otherwise...
I like that you say round 4 because, and it's something that you've been talking about, the macro of things. Is that oversimplified that when Cormier looks at the last fight, I lost those rounds.
Yes.
We got to win those rounds.
It's interesting.
Well, that's super simplified.
Yeah.
Because you
get knocked out way before that.
Yeah.
It's true. There's such a... the reason I've been looking at the big picture so much is that we've all just crawled so far up the micro. We're looking at the weight on the ball of the foot instead of the outside of the foot.
Details.
We're looking at the moment of stepping back, and as people are analyzing, we all have been doing it for years. Oh, in this moment he slips here, and as he does, he rotates under, and a lot of the time those things after the fact can be described, but before it could be rock, paper, scissors, or it could be just, you're throwing this and I'm throwing this and it lands, or it could be just the moments of programming that made this one thing happen in this one space. It could be psychological, it can be so many things. So we've been so deep in the weeds explaining every little thing that sometimes you got to go back out. But you can go way too macro, and that's what you're talking about, is where it's like all I need to do is win round 4. Well, if Jones starts jabbing your face off and you haven't found the answer, there is no round 4.
Exactly.
But if you can get there, Robbie Lawler, and we'll talk about him if you're watching this 2 days before 214, our Lawler analysis will be up within 12 hours. And if you're watching it the day of, it's on our YouTube page. But when Lawler lost round 5 to Johnny Hendricks, you see him go with a couple of minutes left, literally going, I can't believe I lost this fight. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he puts his hand.
Yeah, and then in round 5 against Hendricks, you remember he's like a god.
It's Rory. Yeah.
No, Hendricks
the
second time.
The second time.
He's and even at the end of it, he's inhuman. Because he just, everything in his life was to get that chance back, because he blew it and he knew it. That was on him. So if only I could just get back there, I can make it right. and he did. And then against Rory, one of the greatest round 5s ever. Against fucking Condit, one of the greatest round 5s ever. He became the greatest round 5 fighter ever in those 3 fights. And then if you start thinking that, all of a sudden Tyron Woodley, outside right hand, there is no round. There's not even a minute 3 of round 1. So that's all real. And which is why these fights are so incredible, because any one thing can be the one thing, but it's never really just one thing.
Do you expect anything new from Jon Jones? I mean, yes, because we've seen what he's capable of, and I have a feeling, just based on what we've heard about Jon Jones, that he's not as dedicated as, say, 90% of the UFC's roster. Maybe it's because of genetics or whatever the reason, coaching. But if Jon Jones is 100% dedicated to be an evolving martial artist, what are we going to see different from him?
This thing here, this is called Instagram.
Yeah.
You're not on that, right?
And
are you on Instagram?
No, probably not.
So I have been watching Brandon Six Gun Gibson and everything. Jones is in there every day. Jones is in there working hard. He's leaner and stronger. When we're talking about this, it's not quite weigh-ins yet, but I think when we see him at weigh-ins, we're going to be like, holy shit.
But he knows what Cormier is. As much as he can talk shit, he knows that of every fighter in the UFC's 205-pound division, nobody is going to bring the fight like Daniel Cormier is going to bring the fight.
And what I would love to see, and I don't mean this to be a party pooper, but I'd love to see him fight this fight. I'd love to see it from just a true evolved dominance level, for him to fight this fight the way he fought OSP and just piece him up from the outside and make it look easy. And people would say, that's boring. That'll be on Dan to change that.
Yeah, I think Dan would change that. He wouldn't fight like OSP because he would have a different level of intensity. He wouldn't shy away from
And it might
things.
get one of them knocked out. And you probably wouldn't see that 25 minutes. But if you saw the first 10 like that, where Jones was just touching him up, frustrating him, Cormier was trying to figure it out. And next thing you know, we're at, minute 13 and I haven't done anything. And it would be a different dynamic, but it's going to be cool, man. There's a lot of interesting things happening in fighting. And again, I mentioned that you could see our Lawler breakdown and discussion. Right after this, let's talk. We never do this. We never just talk about non-existent fights, but let's talk about a what-if fight.
100%.
About Jones, or Cormier for that matter, against Brock Lesnar.
UFC 214 goes down, Anaheim, California. The main event, the undisputed light heavyweight championship on the line. Daniel Cormier taking on one of the all-time greats in Jon Jones.